What do you call a politician who gets asked a simple yes or no question and responds with 200 words of waffle that don't actually answer anything? A cabinet minister. Wes Streeting, the health secretary and rumored leadership contender, joined GB News to talk about modernizing the NHS. Sounds straightforward enough. Except the presenters had other plans. They asked him a simple question about whether the government supports U.S. military action in Venezuela and whether it was in line with international law. Simple question, should have a simple answer. Yes, no, or we're still assessing. Except Streeting did what every politician does when they're terrified of actually taking a position. He squirmed, he deflected, he talked about the rules-based order and UK interests and European security. He used a lot of words to say absolutely nothing, and viewers were not impressed. They called him out for refusing to take a stance, for parroting meaningless lines, for being more concerned about his leadership ambitions than about giving honest answers. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we catch politicians in the act of saying everything while meaning nothing. Let's break down Wes Streeting's car crash interview and why it perfectly captures everything wrong with this government. So the setup is important. Wes Streeting, health secretary and someone who's been positioning himself as a potential future Labour leader, joins GB News on Monday, January 6th. He's there to discuss modernizing the NHS, which is his brief, which is what he should be talking about. The NHS is in crisis, waiting lists are through the roof, staff are exhausted, patients are suffering. There's plenty to discuss. But GB News presenters Eamon Holmes and Ellie Costello had other ideas. They wanted to talk about Venezuela. Specifically, they wanted to know where the government stands on Donald Trump's decision to send U.S. Special Forces to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and bring him back to America. It's a legitimate question. This is one of the most dramatic international incidents in years. The UK government should have a position. So Ellie Costello asks directly, is the government supportive of U.S. military action in Venezuela on Saturday? And are you confident that it was in line with international law? That's a beautifully constructed question because it's actually two questions in one. First, do you support it? Second, was it legal? Both are yes or no questions. You can elaborate, you can add context, but fundamentally you should be able to give a clear answer. Does the government support what Trump did? Do you think it was legal? Those are not complicated questions. They're uncomfortable questions because any answer will upset someone. If you say yes, we support it, and yes, it was legal, you're endorsing what many see as a violation of Venezuelan sovereignty. If you say no, we don't support it, and no, it wasn't legal, you're publicly criticizing America and potentially damaging the special relationship. But that's what government is about, making difficult decisions and owning them. Except Streeting doesn't make a decision. He doesn't own anything. He waffles. Here's what he said. What the Prime Minister's considerations are is first and foremost UK interests and national security. Secondly, how do we make sure the people of Venezuela get the government they actually voted for? And thirdly, how do we make sure that we are upholding European defense and security, including our own national security at a time when the rules-based order is being disintegrated before our eyes? And let's be clear about this. A world without rules is a world in which we are all less safe. Let's break that down, because it's a masterclass in political evasion. First, he doesn't answer on behalf of the government. He talks about what the Prime Minister's considerations are. That's deflection. He's distancing himself from the decision while also not actually explaining what that decision is. Second, he lists three vague principles: UK interest, Venezuelan democracy, European security. Great, everyone supports those things in the abstract, but they don't tell you anything about the specific question. Does the government support what Trump did or not? Third, he brings up the rules-based order being disintegrated before our eyes, and claims that a world without rules is a world in which we are all less safe. Which is interesting, because the question was whether Trump's action was in line with international law. If it wasn't, then Trump is the one disintegrating the rules-based order. So is Streeting criticizing Trump? It's not clear. He's using language that could be interpreted as criticism, but he's not saying it directly. It's the political equivalent of subtweeting. You're implying something without actually saying it, so you can deny it later if challenged. It's cowardly, and viewers saw right through it. The reaction on social media was swift and brutal. One viewer fumed, "The only thing disintegrating faster than that order is the trust we have in politicians to sort it out. Time to put common sense before grandstanding." That's a perfect summary. Politicians keep talking about the rules-based order and international law, but they won't actually take positions. They grandstand, they use fancy language, and they hope nobody notices they're not saying anything substantive. Another viewer claimed, In this country, your government has virtually dismantled rules-based order by your two-tier policies. That's a reference to the perception that labor applies different standards to different groups, that there's one set of rules for some communities and another set for others. Whether that's fair is debatable, but the perception is there, and it undermines any moral authority the government might claim when talking about international rules. If you're not following rules at home, why should anyone believe you care about rules abroad? It's a devastating critique, and it's gaining traction. The third viewer raged, trying not to take a stance so as not to destroy his leadership bid. And there it is, the real reason Streeting won't give a straight answer. He's positioning himself as a potential future leader. He doesn't want to take a controversial position that might alienate supporters. So he says nothing. He waffles. He uses diplomatic language that offends nobody and commits to nothing. It's politically safe, but it's intellectually dishonest. And voters are sick of it. They want politicians who will actually take positions and defend them, not politicians who are constantly calculating how every word affects their career prospects. Another viewer added, "This week's parroted line, it's a fast-moving situation. Of course it was an illegal act, they just can't say their opinion out loud." This viewer is pointing out that the government has been using the same excuse for days. It's a fast-moving situation, we don't have all the facts, we're still assessing. These are the lines that Keir has been using, and now Streeting is using similar evasive language. The viewer's conclusion is that the government knows Trump's action was illegal, but they're too scared to say it publicly because it would anger America, so they're hiding behind procedural excuses. And if that's true, and it probably is, that's contemptible, because it means the government knows what the right answer is, but won't say it because it's politically inconvenient. The context about the Venezuela operation itself is important. Elite U.S. Special Forces with more than 150 aircraft stormed the compound of Nicolas Maduro. They seized him and his wife Celia Flores from their bedroom, put them in a helicopter, flew them to the USS Iwo Jima, and transported them to America. Trump watched the whole operation from Mar-a-Lago. This is extraordinary. The U.S. military invaded a sovereign nation, captured its sitting president, and brought him to face trial in America. That's not a peacekeeping mission. That's not a limited strike. That's regime change through military force. It's the kind of thing that used to happen during the height of American imperialism in the 20th century, and it raises fundamental questions about international law, sovereignty, and the use of military force. Now, Maduro is a terrible person. The article mentions that he's been condemned for horrific human rights abuses, including widespread torture, extrajudicial killings by death squads, and sexual violence against women. He's an authoritarian dictator who's destroyed Venezuela's economy and oppressed its people. Nobody's defending Maduro's record, but that's not the point. The point is whether one country has the right to invade another country and kidnap its leader. Because if America can do that to Venezuela, what's to stop other countries doing similar things? What's to stop Russia invading their neighbors and claiming they're liberating people from illegitimate governments? The precedent matters, and if the UK won't stand up and say this was wrong, then the rules-based order that Streeting keeps talking about is already dead. Trump's action was condemned by many, including Labour MP Richard Burgon. Burgon accused Trump of naked colonialism and claimed the U.S. leader is trying to turn Latin America into nothing more than a U.S. colony. He said international law has been cast aside to appease Donald Trump. Now, Burgon is from the left wing of the Labour. He's not representative of the Labour leadership, and his views are often dismissed as French. But on this specific issue, he's articulating what a lot of people are thinking, that Trump's action looks a lot like 19th century imperialism. Big, powerful country invading small, weaker country and overthrowing its government. The fact that Maduro was terrible doesn't change the legal and moral questions, and the fact that the Labour leadership won't say what Burgon is saying suggests they're more concerned about not offending Trump than about standing up for principles they claim to believe in. The stuttering and squirming that the headline mentions is telling. When politicians are confident in their position, they answer clearly and defend their reasoning. When they're not confident, or when they're trying to avoid taking a position, they stutter and squirm and deflect. Streeting's performance on GB News was classic deflection. He didn't want to support Trump's action because it looks bad and goes against Labour values, but he didn't want to criticize it because that would anger America and potentially damage his own political prospects. So he ended up saying nothing of substance, just vague platitudes about UK interests and the rules-based order, and viewers saw right through it.
The comparison to the government's domestic policies is also significant. Multiple viewers pointed out that Labour talks about rules-based order internationally while allegedly applying two-tier policies domestically. The perception, fair or not, is that Labour treats different groups differently, that there's one standard for some communities and another set for others. Whether it's policing, whether it's enforcement of regulations, whether it's public messaging, people feel like the rules aren't applied evenly, and that hypocrisy undermines any moral authority the government might claim when talking about international rules. If you're not following rules at home, why should anyone believe you care about rules abroad? It's a devastating critique, and it's gaining traction. The leadership speculation around Streeting is also important context. He's been mentioned as a potential successor to Starmer. He's young, he's media savvy, he's from the right wing of the party which currently dominates. If Starmer is forced out or chooses to step down, Streeting is on the shortlist. But that means every answer he gives is being scrutinized not just for its immediate content, but for what it says about his judgment and his principles. And this Venezuela answer doesn't look good. It makes him seem like a typical politician who will say whatever is politically convenient rather than what he actually believes. That's fine if you're a backbencher trying to avoid controversy. It's not fine if you want to be prime minister. Leaders need to be willing to take unpopular positions when they believe they're right.